The post went live at 6:23 a.m. Eastern Time on a Tuesday morning in late March. Donald Trump, posting from Mar-a-Lago to his 8 million Truth Social followers, had decided that Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett needed to be put in her place. The post included a screenshot from the previous day's House Oversight hearing, frozen at the moment Crockett had asked him about foreign payments. Trump had drawn a red circle around her face with his finger before uploading it, and the caption read, "Diversity hire Jasmine Crockett thinks she's a prosecutor. Somebody should tell her she's in way over her head. Stick to what you know, sweetheart," which from what I can tell isn't much. Graduated from a law school I've never heard of. Probably got in because of quotas. Sad. Within 90 seconds, the post had 14,000 shares. Within 5 minutes, it was trending across every platform. Screenshots flooded Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, accompanied by the predictable tribal reactions. Trump's supporters filled the comments with laughing emojis and worse. Progressive accounts responded with outrage threads and calls for accountability that would, as usual, lead nowhere. Cable news bookers started texting their producers. By 7:15 a.m., 3 major networks had already scheduled segments for their evening shows built around the post. This was standard Trump controversy protocol. Say something outrageous, dominate the news cycle for 48 hours, move on to the next provocation before anyone could organize a meaningful response. At 7:42 a.m., Jasmine Crockett's communications director received 47 text messages in the span of 3 minutes, all asking the same question: how is she going to respond? The director didn't answer any of them because she'd received different instructions 20 minutes earlier. 3 words in all caps: do not respond. Crockett was already in her congressional office when the post went live. She'd seen it within minutes. Her phone had lit up like a firework display, but she'd silenced the notifications and gone back to the document she'd been reviewing since 5:30 that morning. It was a 284-page report from the Office of the Inspector General at the Department of Defense, and she was on page 197. A junior staffer knocked on her door around 8 a.m. to ask if she'd seen Trump's post. Crockett looked up from the report, her reading glasses perched on her nose, and said, "I saw it. We're not responding." The staffer started to say something about the media requests, but Crockett raised one finger. "Not yet. When I'm ready." By noon, the silence from Crockett's office had become its own story. Political reporters who'd built entire careers on the rapid-fire reaction cycle were genuinely confused. Every other Democrat who'd been attacked by Trump had fired back within hours, and some within minutes. Elizabeth Warren had a social media team that could craft a response thread in the time it took to pour coffee. Adam Schiff kept a folder of pre-written Trump comebacks ready to deploy. Even the White House press secretary had mastered the art of the 2 p.m. response perfectly timed for the evening news. But Crockett's accounts remained silent. No statement from her office. No leaked quotes to friendly reporters. Nothing. Trump posted again at 3:17 p.m., clearly expecting a response that hadn't come. "I see diversity Jasmine has gone quiet. Smart move. Finally learning when she's outmatched. Maybe she'll stick to renaming post offices instead of pretending to understand finance. That's more her speed." That post got 11,000 shares in 10 minutes. Conservative talk radio spent the afternoon playing clips from the hearing and mocking Crockett's silence as proof she had nothing to say. One host suggested she was hiding behind her staff because she knows she got destroyed. Another said she'd finally realized she stepped into the big leagues and wasn't ready. At 4:33 p.m., Crockett left her office and walked to a small recording studio in the Cannon House office building that members of Congress could reserve for video statements. She'd booked it 3 days earlier, long before Trump's post, for an entirely different purpose. But plans change. Her communications director met her there with a single-page script that Crockett had written by hand that afternoon and a laptop already connected to the recording equipment. The studio was bare except for a simple backdrop, navy blue, no flag, no seal, nothing that screamed politician. Just a chair, a camera, and a ring light. Crockett sat down, adjusted the light once, and looked directly into the camera with the same expression she'd carried through yesterday's hearing. Calm, prepared, unbothered. Her communications director hit record. "Good afternoon. My name is Jasmine Crockett, and I represent Texas's 30th Congressional District. This morning, former President Trump posted about me on social media twice. He called me a diversity hire. He said I got into law school because of quotas. He called me sweetheart and suggested I should stick to renaming post offices. I'm sure by now you've all seen the posts. They've been shared widely, and I'm told several news networks have spent the day discussing them." She paused, her hands folded neatly in her lap. "I didn't respond this morning because I was working. Specifically, I was reviewing a report from the Department of Defense Inspector General about military housing contracts awarded during the Trump administration. It's not a short report. It's 284 pages. And what it reveals is directly relevant to why former President Trump might be particularly motivated to attack my credibility right now. She reached off camera and picked up a document, holding it so the cover page was visible. This report was completed in February of this year and released to congressional oversight committees 2 weeks ago. It examines $7 billion in military housing construction and renovation contracts awarded between 2017 and 2020. The Inspector General's office launched this investigation after multiple whistleblower complaints from active duty service members and military families about substandard housing conditions, construction fraud, and what the report calls systemic overbilling practices. Crockett opened the report to a tabbed section. I'm going to walk through some of the findings, and I'm going to do it slowly so everyone can follow along. On page 47, the IG identifies 23 separate military housing contracts that were awarded to a single consortium of development companies called the American Military Housing Group, or AMHG. The contracts totaled $8 billion. That's billion with a B. The contracts covered construction and renovation of military family housing at 14 bases, including Fort Hood in Texas, Fort Campbell in Kentucky, Naval Station Norfolk in Virginia, and 11 others listed in Appendix D. She turned the page. What makes these contracts notable is that AMHG had never built military housing before 2017. In fact, according to the Federal Contractor Database, AMHG didn't exist before 2016. It was incorporated in Delaware in September 2016, 3 months before the Trump administration took office. The company had no track record, no completed projects, and no prior experience with military construction standards. And yet it received $8 billion in no-bid contracts awarded by the Department of Defense under emergency authorization procedures. Her voice remained perfectly level, as if she were reading a grocery list. Now, the IG report raises an obvious question. Why would the Department of Defense award nearly $2 billion to a company with zero experience? The answer is in the corporate structure. AMHG is what's called a special purpose vehicle, or SPV. It's a shell company created specifically to hold these contracts. The actual construction work was subcontracted out to other firms, but the money flowed through AMHG first, and AMHG took a management fee of 18% on every contract. 18% of one's $8 billion is $324 million. That money went to AMHG's parent company, which is a private equity fund registered in the Cayman Islands. Crockett set the report down and looked directly into the camera. The Inspector General's office spent 8 months trying to identify the beneficial owners of that Cayman Islands fund. That means the actual human beings who own it and profit from it. Corporate secrecy laws in the Caymans make that difficult, but the IG eventually succeeded by subpoenaing banking records. The fund is called Liberty Strategic Holdings. It has 11 investors. Their names are listed on page 89 of this report. She picked up the report again and read from the page. Investor number 7 is listed as DJT Revocable Trust Delaware. The IG's office cross-referenced that entity with publicly available trust documents. DJT Revocable Trust is the same trust that Donald Trump established 9 days before his inauguration to hold his business assets while he was president. According to the Cayman banking records, the DJT Revocable Trust invested $12 million into Liberty Strategic Holdings in January 2017. By December 2020, when the trust filed its final disclosure before Trump left office, that investment had grown to $71 million. That's a return of nearly 500% in 4 years. She let that number sit in the air for a moment. So just to recap, a company with no experience receives $1. $8 billion in no-bid military housing contracts from the Trump administration's Defense Department. That company is owned by a Cayman Islands fund. Donald Trump's personal trust is an investor in that fund. His $12 million investment becomes $71 million while he's serving as commander-in-chief. And none of this was disclosed on his financial reports filed with the Office of Government Ethics because the Cayman Fund's ownership structure was hidden behind multiple corporate layers. Crockett turned to another tab section. But here's where it gets worse. The Inspector General didn't just investigate the money, they also investigated the actual housing that was built. Starting on page 112, the report documents the results of physical inspections conducted at all 14 military bases where AMHG held contracts. What they found was catastrophic. At Fort Hood, 340 newly constructed housing units had black mold in the walls within 6 months of completion. At Fort Campbell, the electrical systems in 89 units failed inspection and were deemed fire hazards. At Naval Station Norfolk, the foundation work was so substandard that 12 buildings are now structurally unsound and slated for demolition. Her voice dropped slightly, and for the first time, something other than clinical precision entered her tone. The report includes testimony from military families. I'm going to read you one of them. This is from Staff Sergeant Maria Gonzalez, stationed at Fort Hood with her husband and 2 children, ages 4 and 7. She's quoted on page 126. Crockett found the passage and read it word for word. My daughter started having respiratory problems 2 months after we moved into base housing. We took her to the base clinic 3 times. They said it was seasonal allergies, but she kept getting worse. Finally, a civilian doctor diagnosed her with chronic bronchitis caused by mold exposure. When maintenance came to inspect our unit, they found black mold covering the entire interior of the bedroom walls. It was hidden behind the drywall. The construction company had installed the drywall over wet insulation and just painted over it. My daughter was breathing mold spores for 6 months. She's 7 years old and she now has permanent lung scarring. Crockett closed the report. The silence stretched for 3 full seconds before she spoke again. That's one family. The report documents 127 similar cases. Respiratory illness. Skin infections. 1 child hospitalized with a fungal infection that required surgery. These are military families, people who serve our country. And they were housed in buildings that were constructed so poorly, so cheaply, and with so little oversight that their children got sick. Meanwhile, the company that held the contracts was paying 18% management fees to a Cayman Islands fund that made Donald Trump $59 million richer. She picked up a second document, thinner than the first. This morning, Donald Trump called me a diversity hire. He said I got into law school because of quotas and that I don't understand finance. So let me tell you about my qualifications since he raised the question. I graduated from Bowie State University in 2004. I graduated from the Howard University School of Law in 2008. I spent 6 years as a civil rights attorney in private practice before I ran for the Texas House of Representatives. I served in the Texas legislature for 6 years before running for Congress. I sit on the House Oversight Committee, where my job is to investigate fraud, waste, and abuse in the federal government. Her voice sharpened slightly. I didn't get any of those positions because of quotas. I got them because I worked for them. I studied for them. I earned them. And Donald Trump questioning my credentials doesn't make his $59 million profit from substandard military housing contracts disappear. It doesn't heal the lungs of a 7-year-old girl who was poisoned by mold in a building his investment fund profited from. And it doesn't change what's in this Inspector General's report. She held up the thick document one more time. Everything I've told you in the last 8 minutes is documented in here. Page numbers, dates, dollar amounts, corporate registration records, bank transfers, testimony from military families and inspectors. It's all public record. The report was released to Congress, which means it's available to anyone who wants to read it. I've spent the last 3 days going through it, and I can tell you that what I've shared today is a fraction of what's in here. Crockett set the report down and leaned slightly forward. So here's my response to Donald Trump. You called me a diversity hire this morning. You said I'm in over my head. You told me to stick to what I know. Well, what I know is how to read financial documents. What I know is how to trace money through shell corporations and offshore accounts. What I know is how to connect $1. $8 billion in contracts to $59 million in personal profit to 127 sick children living in moldy military housing. And what I know, Mr. Trump, is that attacking my credentials doesn't make any of that go away. She paused. You posted about me twice today. You called me names. You questioned my intelligence and my qualifications. You did it because yesterday I asked you about $22 million in undisclosed foreign payments and you couldn't answer the question. You did it because you're about to be asked about $59 million in undisclosed domestic payments, and you won't be able to answer that question either. So you attacked me personally because that's what you do when you don't have a defense. Her expression didn't change, but I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to keep reading these reports. I'm going to keep asking questions. And I'm going to keep doing my job, which is holding powerful people accountable when they use public office for private profit. You can call me whatever names you want. You can question my credentials, my intelligence, my qualifications. It won't change the math. It won't change the documents. And it definitely won't stop me from doing the work I was elected to do. Crockett stood up, and the camera followed her. I'm going to submit this entire Inspector General's report to the official congressional record tomorrow morning. I'm also going to request a full committee hearing on military housing contract fraud, and I'm going to invite some of the families whose children got sick to testify. I'm going to ask the current Secretary of Defense to explain how a company with no experience got $1, $8 billion in no-bid contracts. And I'm going to ask the Treasury Department to investigate whether Donald Trump's $59 million profit from those contracts was properly disclosed on his taxes. She picked up both documents and held them against her side. To the families at Fort Hood, Fort Campbell, Norfolk, and the 11 other bases affected by this fraud, I see you. Your children's illnesses matter. The substandard housing you were forced to live in matters. And the fact that someone profited while you suffered matters. That's why I'm doing this work. She looked directly into the camera one final time. And to Donald Trump, you asked me to stick to what I know. This is what I know. You just made the mistake of drawing attention to it. The video ended. Crockett's communications director stopped the recording at 5:11 p.m. The file was 11 minutes and 37 seconds long. They spent 8 minutes editing it down to remove 2 brief pauses where Crockett had referenced the wrong page number and corrected herself. The final cut was 11 minutes and 14 seconds. At 5:34 p.m., it was uploaded simultaneously to Crockett's Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok accounts with a caption that read, "My response to this morning's posts." The first share happened at 5:35 p.m. By 5:42 p.m., the video had 50,000 views. By 6:00 p.m., it had crossed 400,000. At 6:23 p.m., exactly 12 hours after Trump's original post, Crockett's video hit 1 million views and was trending #1 on Twitter. Cable news networks scrambled to rebook their evening segments. The story was no longer Trump attacks Congresswoman. The story was now Congresswoman reveals Trump profited from military housing fraud. By 8:09 p.m., the video had 8 million views. Progressive groups were clipping the section about Staff Sergeant Gonzalez's daughter and sharing it as a standalone segment. Veterans organizations were posting statements calling for immediate hearings. 3 Republican members of the House Armed Services Committee released statements saying they supported a full investigation into the AMHG contracts. Donald Trump's True Social account, which typically posted 15 times per day, had gone completely silent. By 10:00 p.m., the view count had reached 23 million. The Inspector General's report, which had been gathering dust on a government website for 2 weeks, crashed the server from download requests. The Department of Defense press office released a statement saying they were reviewing the IG's recommendations and would cooperate fully with any congressional investigation. The White House press secretary issued a statement supporting full transparency in military contracting. At 11:47 p.m., Donald Trump finally posted again. The fake news is running with another witch hunt story based on a totally discredited report. I was never involved in any military housing deals. My lawyers handled all business matters while I was serving the country. This is just another attempt to distract from the real scandals, Hunter's laptop, the border crisis, and the stolen 2020 election. Sad. The post got 6,000 shares in the first hour. Crockett's video by that same timestamp had reached 35 million views. When Jasmine Crockett finally left her office at 12:30 a.m. Wednesday morning, her phone had 284 unread text messages, 47 missed calls, and 1,847 Twitter notifications. She silenced all of it and drove home in silence, listening to nothing but the sound of her car engine and the late-night traffic on Constitution Avenue. She'd been awake for 21 hours. She had 4 committee meetings scheduled for Wednesday and a briefing with DoD officials at 2 p.m. The Inspector General's report was sitting in her briefcase, still tabbed and annotated because she was only halfway through her full analysis. By Thursday morning, the video had been viewed 47 million times. It had been covered by every major news outlet in America and several international papers. The hashtag Dr. Crockett Receipts was trending in 14 countries. 6 separate congressional committees had announced investigations into military housing contracts. The Pentagon had ordered an immediate audit of all contracts awarded to AMHG. And Donald Trump had posted 9 more times, each one angrier and less coherent than the last, none of them addressing the actual substance of what Crockett had revealed. In her congressional office that Thursday afternoon, Jasmine Crockett sat at her desk reviewing page 198 of the Inspector General's report, exactly where she'd left off Tuesday morning before Trump's first post. A reporter from the Washington Post had requested an interview about how it felt to have the most viewed political video of the year. Crockett's communications director had politely declined and told the reporter that the Congresswoman was working because 47 million views were impressive, but they weren't the point. The point was in the documents. It was always in the documents, and there were still 86 pages left to read.